Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Ken Wakefield, welcome to the Center of the Universe, and Virginia is for Sports. We don't do this very often, but Ken, your story is broader than I think sports in Virginia for sure. And I'd rather spend an hour getting to know you a little bit better than spending the 30 minutes we typically do for the sports podcast. So welcome to both podcasts.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You having me.
Yeah, man. All right. So let's break this out first. I made a comment about how Caroline County and Buffalo are not the same when we chatted before we hopped on this recording. But you grew up, born and raised in Buffalo. Tell me what that was like.
Yeah, great. Great place. I still go there every 4th of July during the dead period. So all my family is still in Buffalo. So I go back there and visit every now and then. They come up to games and things like that and support me, at different times throughout the year. But for the most part, everybody's staying back in the Buffalo area. But I have a lot of great connections. That's where my coaching career started and all of that stuff. So a lot of really good people in Buffalo that I stay in constant communication with all year round.
What would you say the main driver for you not living in Buffalo anymore? Was it the love of football and is going to take you wherever you wanted to go, or are you just a guy who wants to experience more than what Buffalo has to offer, or something else?
Really, my story started when I coached in at a Catholic school in Buffalo, New York, St. Francis, and I was there for 9 years and absolutely loved every second of it. Great experience. Not only allowed me to grow as because I was really young at the time when I got into coaching, but it allowed me to grow as a person. I was around a lot of really, really good people. Those coaches the head coach there, his name's Jerry Smith. He's actually still there right now. And so I knew if I ever wanted to go a little bit further in the coaching career that it had to be somewhere else. And obviously I have a degree, I have a teaching degree and things like that, from SUNY Brockport. So at the time in New York, it's very different as far as Virginia and things like that, as far as getting a job. Those jobs, as far as a PE job or things like that, don't come available. I remember sitting down and talking to my first interview, and this was at my alma mater where I went to high school. They said, "Hey, you're interviewing with 100 other candidates." I'm like, "Oh, okay, no pressure." You know what I mean? So needless to say, I didn't get that opportunity, didn't, come through for me. So I thought it was a good idea for me to start looking elsewhere. And I still want to stay in coaching, obviously. And Virginia just happened to be the place that that first opportunity came here. So that's what really brought me here. But boy, that was you had mentioned, Caroline, and that was I will tell you, that was an interesting drive there from Buffalo the first time I made it. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's double-digit hours, right, to get down to Caroline from Buffalo, isn't it?
Well, normally no. Like right now, if you told me to do it, I could probably do it in probably under 8. At the time, never driving, never driving in some of the back roads of Caroline. I was like, oh my gosh, because in just little things like street lights and things like that in Buffalo, they're all over the place, but the back roads in Caroline, they don't exist. So I'm driving like a snail going into this interview. I remember driving, it was real late at night. I got there the night prior and ended up staying at a hotel right off 95. And it was just one of those things where, yeah, I was just getting familiar with the area, and it was just very different. So.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Awesome. All right, Coach. So I want to go back to the Buffalo thing, and I'll probably have a couple questions about Buffalo and that area. Buffalo at least to me, I think to most people is known as people that live there, grew up there. They're pretty tough, right? And
Yeah.
look, you go to a Buffalo Bills game. Before the game, people are putting people through tables.
Yes.
I mean, that's who they are. That's who you guys are.
Yeah.
Tell me a couple things that you, I guess, that were innate from being from Buffalo that you brought to your coaching career, not only when you were coaching up in New York, but as you've come down to Virginia. What are a couple things that Buffalo is kind of, brought from Buffalo to make things?
I think the main thing is tough love. I'll say this. Coach Smith, like I mentioned him already at St. Francis, he's the head football coach there. It was at the time when I first started coaching, it was very, very intense. Like the expectations were very high. And they didn't pull any punches on the sideline in regards to if you didn't meet those expectations. And I figured out really quick what that was like. I mean, it was a different culture. It was a different atmosphere, but the level of expectation was the level of expectation. They had a standard that was set, and I grew there, and I didn't understand that at first. Like I was really young in my coaching career, and I was really young, just started. I mean, I started coaching when I was 19. So with that, I had a lot of growing up to do, and there was a lot of things like that I was going through from just an overall personal perspective that I just needed to grow. And that opportunity gave me just constant development, not only from a football coach, but as a man, to be honest with you. And there was a lot of things that I took from that experience that I will always look back on and cherish that. I go back there, like I said, yearly. I'm constantly talking to those guys in regards to, hey, if something does come up, like if I have an issue, or hey, how'd you guys deal with this, or just those type of networking. Being a coach, a lot of it is those coaches. You see it at any level. They always reach out to coaches that they've had experience with, they have a relationship with. It's usually there's a tight knit group where it's a group of guys that you really feel you bond with. There's so much time that you invest in. But at the time, when I first started there, I was commuting from, I don't know, are you guys familiar with Buffalo at all? Like the area in itself? Have you ever been there?
I've been there a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I from where I lived, I commuted about an hour away to college, and then I would drive probably about an hour and a half after that to go coach. So I was going through a lot of different things, doing different things, just trying to make ends meet when things weren't working out from a teaching perspective and stuff like that. But to answer your overall question, I think I just learned just the different things of that mentality, tough love, and don't take things personally. Like there's a lot of things, and I tell my players this, I tell my staff this, it's never anything. When I say something to them, it's never personal. It's always to help them in the positive. And as a young man at the time, I didn't understand. That took me a while to understand that concept. But I think it's an extremely important life lesson that, hey, it's it's a way in Buffalo. It's tough. You go to a football game and the Bills, it's going to be a little different from other atmospheres. But I really liked it. I thought that the experience was great, but I think if one thing points out, that would be it, that it is a very much a blue collar atmosphere. And people take a lot of pride in that. You see the Bills fans going, they call them the Bills Mafia for a reason. You see what goes on there on Sunday afternoons. So.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have another Buffalo question, Kevin? You said you had a couple.
I mean, one of the questions was, and it's more of a weather question. From my understanding, you guys are on the other side of Lake Erie from Toronto.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So actually where I coached, at St. Francis was literally right on the Lake Erie. It was literally the street. If you went across the street, the lake's right there. So the weather was big time. You were getting hit majorly from weather. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Sorry.
So coming from here to there was a huge adjustment. I'm sorry, flip that. Coming from there to here, it was a huge adjustment. You had to constantly, just the summers here, I had a hard time acclimating to, holy cow, how hot it was. And those August days are a little bit different than they are in Buffalo. But on the flip side, November in Buffalo is a different world than here. We would be in games where it would be sleeting and snowing and things like that. And that was just a normal. Well, whereas here, you just don't, you get big storms, but it's never like that. Not to that extent.
Yeah. I just remember the people in Toronto saying that, hey, yeah, it gets cold here, but across the lake, they get all the snow, which is crazy how that works. But
yeah. All my family always saying, because I asked them, there are times where you'll get 7 feet of snow. And here you get an inch in schools getting closed. There, they would laugh. They'd be like, no way. Now, and it took me a while, to understand, hey, it's a little bit different. The climate's obviously different. They're way more prepared and they're dealing with a lot of more, where here it's a lot more rural areas in certain spots, where those back roads I can understand get pretty tough and pretty icy to get to. Whereas Buffalo, it's constant. When the weather gets bad, it gets bad. But canceling school, not happening. You get a foot and you're still going. So,
yeah, I've lived in this area 55 years. I don't think we've had a total of 7 feet in my entire life.
Yeah, yeah. And just recently they got hit with 7 feet. I mean, it was really bad there. So,
man,
it's definitely different.
That's hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
Your comment about country roads in Carolina, Hanover has this too. They still don't have lights.
No. Yeah. And I when I was driving here, I was like, holy cow. I really had to slow down because I didn't know where the next turn was going to be. I didn't know what was going to happen or where I was going to end up. So it definitely, it was definitely an adjustment.
Yeah, they just kind of laid down roads that made sense for the farms, and they just haven't changed them or redirected it ever since then. All right, I'm guessing you played football growing up?
I did, yeah.
Did you play any other sports?
Yeah, I was a multi-sport athlete. I played basketball. At the school that I went to, they had a powerlifting. So I competed in that during ironically during basketball season. And I know that people will say, oh yeah, those things don't mesh. I have a kind of a different philosophy on that in regards to that. So I wasn't by any means a phenomenal basketball player, but I played, and then I ran track. So call it 3 sports, I guess, as far as different things that I, was into. But the powerlifting and things like that was always lifting and keeping myself in shape was always a passion of mine. So I competed in, different competitions in high school.
All right. So it's funny you mentioned powerlifting and basketball. My football coach in high school was also my basketball coach. So we lifted all the time. And it's really weird shooting a basketball after you've done a lot of lifting weights. It's very strange.
Yes, it is. It's very different. But you see all these, I know I see behind you that VCU, that jersey and stuff like that. And you see these athletes nowadays that they're in the gym, you know what I mean? They're lifting, they look different. They're big physical, athletes at that next level. So, just a little bit different. That's all.
I do have to ask, since you mentioned you played multiple sports, do you want your football players to play multiple sports? Do you want them to be wholly focused on football or whatever works for the kid?
Yeah, I think I think there's a variety of different, to each his own. To most part, I think there is a variety of different things that you can take away from playing other sports, without a doubt. Hearing a different voice, obviously your voices, getting coached by different people, that's always a positive. And building up your body in different ways, I think that's also important, because there's different training that goes along with each of those sports that can benefit athletes in certain ways. I think nowadays it's, I guess people are on one side of the fence or they're on the other. From what I see, there's some people that say, hey, I'm going to totally focus on being a better whatever it happens to be. I want to be a better basketball player. I want to be better this, and I'm going to focus on travel or whatever's going on to get myself better. But then I also see a variety of different people that choose to play different sports, and I think that's great too. So I think whatever fits for that particular, individual in regards to, their particular, what their goals are. But there's definitely, I think there's benefits to both. Because at the same time, especially now at the college ranks, things are harder and harder with the portal. I meet with college coaches on a pretty regular basis. And the one thing that stuck out to me when they said is they don't necessarily take potential anymore. Like the potential is they're looking at somebody that is either already developed or already mature. They can pull a guy that's 2 years in college and already fully developed, whereas sometimes a high school athlete is going to take a little bit longer. So it's a little bit of a risk. So it's a different, I guess it's looking at a little bit more from a business side of things now than it used to. You could probably say 5-6 years ago. You know what I mean? Things have changed greatly in the last year. So in the last couple of years. So with that, I think coaching obviously is one of those sports and one of those professions that you constantly have to adapt, that you constantly have to change and do different things with.
Wow, that's a great segue to what I was going to ask you. I don't know, it's almost like you read my mind, which wouldn't be hard to do. So we've talked earlier about toughness and Buffalo and your early part of your life and career, and now you're coaching high school kids.
Yeah.
How do you motivate kids? I mean, are you able to use what you learn and kind of tweak it? Because I imagine, and you tell me, you can't really just go hard nose on kids these days. They're just so different, right?
Yeah.
How have you adapted as a coach to make it work?
I think I'm still adapting. I think this week, how I would approach this week and how I approach next week is different. To be honest with you, I think that's the most honest answer I can give, because every week is a little bit different, and you kind of have to treat not only each year but each week differently. I actually earlier this year I had a conversation with our team of saying, there were certain things that I tried to motivate our group with last year that wasn't the most successful or wasn't most productive. So I'm always looking at ways to kind of better that and make that a little bit more. So I think this day and age in coaching, you have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to, to be able to go on the fly a little bit and try something that's, a little bit different. But at the same time, you're still trying to keep your same philosophies and same beliefs. One of our biggest beliefs, and that I show it to the kids and the parents during our first player-parent meeting, is my philosophy is tough guys win football games. But there's different parts of being tough. There's mental toughness, there's physical toughness, there's different aspects of that. So, but finding different ways to, communicate that and get that across the players is different, because every player is motivated in a different way. And now and every player wants to have a different experience. Some are playing just for the love of the game, and some are playing for, hey, I want to try to go be a collegiate athlete in that particular sport. So those two type of athletes, you got to treat a little bit different.
Yeah.
Coach, I'm looking at your schedule right now. You've got Mills Godwin coming up. Do you know the coach at Mills Godwin?
Yes, I do. He actually used to coach at Patrick Henry.
He has deep roots where you live right now, where you coach.
Yep, he does. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he probably not to say that you don't want to win as bad as he does, but he's got a lot of special reasons to beat Patrick Henry, I think.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I mean, I don't know him, to that extent, but we've had different conversations because he took over the job last year in Godwin, and we had at various coaching events or things like that, we've ran into each other and spoken a couple times. But everybody that I speak to around, Patrick Henry speaks very highly of him. So I think he's a good guy. And I think obviously he did a great job in year one, getting that program in the position that it's in right now.
All right. So Coach, how are you feeling about the upcoming season?
Positive. There's obviously every week there's always going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be things that you want to improve on. Sometimes as a football coach, someone will come up to me at the end of the game and a game that we've, won and say, hey, congratulations. And as a coach, you're always looking at it of saying, hey, you're happy to have that win. You're happy to do, because it's extremely hard to win. But on the flip side, you're always looking at how we can be better. As a football coach, my goal has always been, hey, are we playing our best football towards the end of the year? That's what I'm really gaining. Are we constantly progressing and constantly moving as the season goes on? And that's always been a goal. I'm pretty realistic in regards to, if you look at us in week one, that it's probably not going to look the way it's going to look in week 6 or week 8. You know what I mean? Things are going to change. And some of that's going to due to just the nature of football. Injuries going to happen, things like that. But you become a little bit more polished as the season goes on. So, I think our schedule is extremely tough, but I like it that way because then we don't have a false feel of who we are or how talented we are. Right out of the gate, I mean, our first 2 scrimmages were Douglas Freeman and Manchester. And boy, if you look at those 2 teams, you're probably gonna feel like, oh boy, I don't know how good we really, are we any good? Because both those programs are really good. But it does give you a realistic expectation of where you're truly at, and it allows our kids to go compete. And actually, I think that really helped us in game 1 this last week in being able to pull out the win against Louisa, because they had to feel those prior 2 weeks of that tough competition.
All right, Coach. So I interview a player coming out of the halftime locker room, and you guys are up 20-0. And I interviewed a player coming out of your halftime locker room, and you're down 20-0. What's the difference in their answers?
In regards to just like
how do you handle? Yeah, I mean, are you like constant at a halftime guy, or is it depend? I mean, obviously it's fluid, right? Every game's different. But what is your plan? Let me re-ask that question. What's your plan at halftime normally?
I think just going in and feeling out the kids and how the game's being played out is how I'm going to respond. Like if I feel like the energy's low, it's going to be kind of getting into them a little bit more and being a little bit more, can't say forceful, but yeah, a little bit more, upbeat and kind of like getting after them a little bit. But at the same time, I think there's a happy medium there because I also know that it's a team, in my opinion, that settles down first and is able to react and is be able to think through is the team that's going to have success, coming in and out of a half. So I think that's a little bit different in my approach in regards to how I'm going to handle the team and also what had happened. I think the biggest thing is kind of correcting mistakes at halftime and saying, hey, how we got here and how we got there. Because fortunately I've been up 20 and I've been down 20. So I know both sides of that. So with that, I think it's just a matter of kind of reading the team and seeing where their head's at to make those decisions about what you're going to talk about and what the focal point's going to be and how you got either up or down. I know this, if we're up by 20, I tell them it's 0-0. I always tell them if we're up big that we have to forget about the first half, because if you get caught up in the mindset of, hey, it's over, then it allows teams to creep back in. I know a couple years back, boy, we were actually up 20-0, 20 or 21-0 against Verina, and we lost that game by a point. So yeah, those are the things that maybe I should have said something different at halftime, and I didn't, but I know that's one of the things that I said, that, hey, you have to treat this like it's 0-0, because that team, if it's a quality team, they're going to come out making adjustments. The coaches are going to make adjustments, and that's what it is. It's a game of those adjustments and doing the small things. So it's making those in-game adjustments that will make the difference of whether you're going to finish a game or you're not going to finish a game.
There's something about the teenage male brain that when they're succeeding greatly, it's hard to maintain it.
It really is. So it's kind of keeping, I guess if you're going to see me, and most people that truly know me, I'm a tough guy to read. You know what I mean? I look like a guy that I'm always unhappy. Like if you look at me and I'm walking on the hallway of the school, I'm going to look like I'm in the military, or I don't look very approachable. I'm well aware of that. Like my wife says, hey, what's wrong with you? I said, I'm just going to get something to eat. There's nothing. It's just the expression on my face. It doesn't necessarily change, but it's who I am. And it's not whether I'm upset or whether I'm in a good mood or a bad mood. For me, it's just, I always have and it's not intentional, but I have that look like I'm mad, where I'm not necessarily always mad, but yeah, I don't know.
I think it can work for a football coach.
Yeah. So I try not to get too high or too low on the sidelines, because I understand that the game is just last week we played in a game that was paused, I think 3 times due to weather and things like that. So, and if you saw, I had made this comment to my coaching staff at the end of the game, every 5 minutes of that game, you probably looked on the sideline and say, holy cow, that team has momentum, or then it switched over to the other team having momentum. So if you get too high and low in football, it's tough. It's really tough. So I try to stay kind of even keel for the most part. I think if someone were to ask, that would probably fit, my normal response on the sideline is staying pretty neutral for the most part.
As a player and as an assistant coach over the years, have you been more defensive minded or offensive minded?
When I started my football career, I was more on the defense side of the ball. But then, I was told a long time ago that if you want to be a good football coach, just like you want to be a good player, you better know a little bit of everything. So I took the time sitting down with the right people. I'm big on meeting with the right people, and I've been extremely fortunate. I will say this to anybody. I've been extremely, extremely fortunate being around a great group of people. That's the only reason I'm in the position that I'm in, is because I've been able to be around and put myself around people that are extremely knowledgeable, extremely smart, and I believe in them. And I'm a big believer. There was a quote that I saw, as a football coach, you got to have a short memory, because there's going to be times that people are going to say, there's going to be people that say, hey, you're either really good or you're really bad. And it's usually not, it's somewhere in between, to be honest with you. So having said that, I think it's just really important to kind of, keep yourself grounded and go from there.
All right, Coach, I'll put you on the spot. Pick the game from your coaching career that you are most proud of based on how you coached that game. And I guess the outcome most likely was a win, but you never know.
Coach, Kevin's asking questions that he wouldn't want to answer himself if he were.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go the opposite with that. I'm going to say my first year as a head football coach, I got into a program. I was at Culpeper, and the season wasn't going. We got off to a rough start, and when I say a rough start, we got blown out. We got blown out the first game, and then it was probably week 2. We had won a game. Well, we had won our first game, and the program hadn't won a game in 2 years prior. So anyways, we're going in, and probably 3 weeks into that season, we had a group of guys that decided that they didn't want to follow team rules. So we didn't have a very big team as it was, but I suspended those guys for that week. And I went we were playing a game in Charlottesville. We played it, and I'll never forget it. We ended up going into that game with 18 players. And so we had in the first series of that, we had a pretty good inside linebacker. He got concussed and he was out of the game. So it knocked us down even more. And it was a game that was pretty warm out. I recall the night. We had kids puking on the sideline, and we were down big. And I remember we were down probably what you were talking about. We were down by 20, I think, at the half. And at the beginning of the fourth, we were down by 6, I believe. We came all the way back. We had kids that were coming off the sideline. Our quarterback, I had to put it inside linebacker. He came off the sideline just to puke. And he said, "Coach, I'm going to go right back in. I just need one play." And I couldn't have been – we ended up losing that game, but I couldn't have been more proud of the group of players. And from that point in time, we did not – when I was there, we did not miss the playoffs after that. Every year was consistently – it grew and grew and grew and got better and better and better. And I think I'll always look back on that time and say, man, that was a really tough decision to make as a football coach, but it was the right decision. And I think it won the kids over. The kids got to believe in themselves, and we took huge strides from that. Fortunately for me, I've been in games where you could say they've been extremely, big games, and that's been awesome. But to me, it's more important that those guys that played in that game will never forget that game. They're never going to forget the time that they laid everything that they possibly could out. And I saw it in them. And as a coach, sometimes you get into those games and you might have won. You might have won a big game, but they didn't lay it all out there. Not like that. And as a coach, to me, that's special. I'll never, ever forget that. And I'll always be grateful for those kids of believing in me enough to say, hey, we're going to do this. And we fell a little bit short, but that was more of a life lesson than anything else to me. And that was extremely important. So that was hands down, even though we lost that game, I think we came away with tremendous growth. And for that, I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, it sounds like they learned a lot of life lessons there. One of which is they understood that their potential, their belief potential before that game was so much higher than they even understood. Yeah.
So it was just one of those times that, I've been very fortunate to play. I've played games where we've been on ESPN. I've played high school games where there's been 40,000 people in the stands. So, and we've won in some of those situations. So, but that game in particular with that group of guys, really hit home for me.
Sounds like, it's one of the handful of games that will stay with you the rest of your life.
Yeah.
All right. I hate to make this turn in the conversation, Coach, but we cannot avoid talking about the history of the Buffalo Bills. And let me just say that I love the Bills fans more than I love the Bills.
Yeah.
Not just the toughness and the blue collar thing, but their heart seems to be bigger than the average fan base, a lot bigger. I think there's a story last year that, Kevin, you probably remember the details of, and Coach, you probably do too, where they did a GoFundMe for another city's team.
Got hurt.
They didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
But the thing that it's hard to avoid talking about, and I'm going to bring it up with you, and I just love your reaction. What's it like to go to 4 straight Super Bowls as a Bills fan and not win a single one of them?
Yeah. Well, here's what I'm going to say is I'm actually a Seahawks fan.
Oh, no.
But I do at the time going through it, I lived in a household that was heavily Bills fans, and not that I didn't like the Bills per se, but I wasn't a per se diehard like some of the families or some of my friends and things like that. And it was tough. It was one of those things around where, but that just goes to the blue collar type of mentality that is in that area of people understanding like, hey, times are tough. It's not always going to be good. People are going to say this, that, and the other, but you got to get up and you got to keep grinding and keep working. But that's that atmosphere. It is tough. It was heartbreaking for a lot of those people around there. And I'll never, the wide right and the things like that, we're crushing. And I think it was, but yeah, a lot of fans, now my son, that's his favorite team, but, he's too young to remember those days. But it's just one of those things that Bills fans are. Hey, they're very optimistic. They're not gonna not show up to a game. They're just gonna give it their all. When they show up, you guys see it. Like I said, we talked about a little about the Bills Mafia as it is. They've got a short memory. And they're gonna support their team, good, bad, or indifferent, as hard as they can.
Coach, I kind of walked into that. I had all this set up because I was convinced you were a Bills fan. And look, you're a Gen Xer like Kevin and I are. Kevin's a Chargers fan. He's from Virginia. I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. I'm from Virginia. There's something about Gen X and just being contrarian enough to not follow the conventional path, I guess.
Yeah. I'm actually a huge Seahawks fan. And the only reason I'm a big Steve Largent fan. And
I love Steve Largent.
When I was growing up, he was the guy that I liked the most because of his mentality, and he kind of was similar to I was undersized, but I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't this or that, and he was that kind of guy. Like, he wasn't a guy that was a blazer, but he had great hands. He was always reliable. He was one of those guys that I always thought did things the right way, so, and ever since then, I mean, you talk about ups and downs, like Seattle's had their share as well, but, the Bills, it's cool. It's great to see, that the new stadium and everything they're doing, down in the Buffalo area. So yeah, it's good to see that people are still following them and rooting for them, and still there's still the same hardcore fans they were when they were making that run in those Super Bowls. So
Todd Virginia's for sports in here. If JMU kicker Scott Norwood makes that field goal, I often say that maybe you win 4 in a row, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just turns. It's a different mentality then. Even though, I mean, a couple of the teams you guys lost to were just Dallas was crazy good back then. But
I agree. I mean, you never know. It's just the funny thing about sports. You just don't know. Like, sometimes momentum, and you're right. That field goal goes in, and then who knows? They get on a roll and things go differently. But I guess that just builds. That's just part of Buffalo, and it's just who they are. That just kind of goes with everything about the aura of Buffalo, of just going in there in that blue collar town, of just saying, hey, we're just going to get back up and keep rolling from there.
Coach,
So,
go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, I wanted to go back to something that we talked to other coaches about, and Paul and I, and you are parents of athletes. What advice would you give parents of a rising high school athlete? What's the best advice you could give them? And I'm not even going to say this kid was a 5-star or 1-star. It's just a kid that's playing on your football team. What advice do you give the parents?
I guess a couple things. One, the first thing is to be a good student. That's going to be the first thing, because regardless of what your goals are, the end goal is to get a degree. The end goal is to have good grades, and and to really focus on those specific things. If you're doing the right thing in the classroom, if you're doing the right thing, if you're doing the little things, the big things become much, much easier. One of my philosophies that I brought in is you'll see it on t-shirts that we wear. You'll see it on in our weight room. It's embrace the process. And what that is all encompassing. It's doing the little things, because if a athlete is fortunate enough to go play collegiate football somewhere, or any sport, doesn't matter what it is, someone's going to come in that building and ask about that player. And they could ask a teacher, they could ask somebody in the hallway. And what they want to know is if someone's going to lay down that type of money, say, scholarships or whatever, in these days, it's even way more into it than that. But if someone is going to put that amount of money down, what are they getting in return? And they have to know that person and they're looking for people that are quality people. Every coach that I talk to from at the next level always talks about, hey, what type of person is he? How does he carry himself? What type of body language does he have? So focusing on those things, being extremely coachable, I think all of those things go a really, really long way, but it does go back to doing the little things. If you get good at doing the little things, you become a much better athlete. And understanding what those little things are in your particular sport will take you so far in that sport. Become a student of the game in whatever sport that you happen to be playing, and seek out. And that goes to some of the things that you talked about before of a kid will know. I think being in this game long as I've been in it, kids are going to know when someone is not being real with them. A good kid, a kid will know, hey, that guy's a good coach, and he doesn't have to spend that long with them to figure that out. He'll know that right away. You can walk into a room with someone, and it won't take you long to say, oh, wow, that person's a different level guy, or that's a different level female. Whatever the particular situation happens to be, good when you see it. So just, being coachable, getting around those type people, and don't burn bridges. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people say, oh, I don't like this, or I'm quick to point a finger here or there. Life is, it's a lot about who you know, and a lot of people know different people. So being that good person, that goes a long, long way. And I think sometimes we get lost on, hey, are they a good athlete? Well, if you do the little things and you're a good person, you're going to do those things, you've already won. You've already won regardless, because at the end of the day, sports are going to come to an end. They are, for everybody. I don't know when that clock is, and each and everybody's a little bit different. But at some point in time, that clock says, hey, you're done with the sport. So now what? What else do you have to fall back on? If you could say, man, I did this the right way, and I know that, you've won. You've won. And for those kids, and that's huge. And I am in a very fortunate position, and been so for a long time, to be able to look back and say, boy, I coached this guy, and now he's a lawyer, or he's this, or he's that. It's just and at one point in time, we shared a moment, or we shared a bus ride, or whatever it may be, and I know I'm kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent there, but it is. It's about really being, I guess my advice would be, hey, be a good person, do the little things. And if you embrace doing the little things, boy, you're going to come out a winner regardless of the situation. Don't get caught up in all of the, hey, I have to, the internet or the social media, or I have to do this. No, everybody's path's a little bit different. And even the great ones have failed at different times, and they're coming up with adversity. And because they, it was that hard that got them through. And that shows the type of character that some of those people have, that when the opportunity came, they rose to the occasion, but they wouldn't do that if they didn't do the little things really well. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but
it's a great answer. It's good life advice, actually, for everybody, not just the kids.
Yeah.
Coach, you had referenced transfer portal earlier and how it impacts recruiting of high school athletes. Like they're not looking for potential anymore. Go prove yourself your freshman, sophomore year somewhere else, and then you can transfer into us.
Right.
Had a massive impact, obviously, on college sports, but I hadn't put together that it would have such an impact on recruiting, especially as I knew what recruiting looked like, not as an athlete necessarily, but my friends that were really good athletes who were getting a lot of attention. It was a very different experience where it was based on potential almost entirely.
Yeah.
NIL, I just learned recently, I've heard it referred to as the Wild Wild West, which I assume was limited to college, but there are high school kids that can now dabble in NIL. How do you think about NIL at the high school level for the Patrick Henry football team?
I will say this. I think it's a bad idea in general. I think high school athletes are meant to be high school athletes. Let them go do what high school athletes should do. It's not about, I've been in different places and I've seen, different things in regards to that, but it is a challenge, and I can't say that I have a great answer in regards to what's the fix for it, because I'm not sure there is. I think we've gone in the direction of, obviously at the college level, they've gone into a completely different atmosphere in regards to, because just recently I had a conversation. One of the things we had spoke prior to even being on this podcast is I actually, in the off season, I visit different schools and I get around different coaches, and I'll ask them, very specifically in regards to the portal and the NIL stuff, and everybody's battling like an Ohio State or Alabama is going to be at the top tier, and then the right below them is going to be a Maryland, you know what I mean, or schools like that, or they're always going to be battling for something a little bit more. But I think it gets away from the purity of the game. Most people love high school football because it's a pure, and most people really like college football because it didn't have all those other things tied in with it. It didn't have, hey, they're playing just for the love of the game. Now you're watching a bowl game and you're saying, wow, I don't even know who this is that I'm watching half the time, right? I mean, do we really want to get to that point from a high school level that's saying, hey, this guy's going to sit out, or this guy's transferring here, or this guy's transferring there? It becomes almost like a scapegoat of saying, well, I don't like X, Y, and Z, so I'm leaving here. I don't have this opportunity, so I'm leaving here. So what are we teaching? What are we teaching anybody? We're teaching them that the easy way is just to, I'm going to, and again, every situation, I'm not saying that everyone that transfers or anything like that. I'm just saying that it just becomes the answer. Hey, things aren't going my way, so I have to find a way. I got to go where it's about the money. And maybe again, I'm looking at that the wrong way, but I think high school athletes should be about just, hey, the purity of the sport and letting them, play the sport. And now from a collegiate perspective, it is. I know coaches that have come up to me and said they don't have a conversation with an athlete that's that caliber without talking about money anymore. Wow. Okay. So that goes a long way. So then you get the parents, and I do know that some high school kids, even in this area, have handlers, And some of those handlers they're just friends. And they're steering kids in the wrong direction. They're just in it for the money. And that's not good. That's not good for the game at all. So, again, to each his own. But I think the high school game should be about the high school game, them learning life lessons. The college game is what the college game is right now. And I don't see, unfortunately, it going back to the other side of things, but, I would probably say that most college coaches wish it would, because I'm sure that they have so many conversations about, hey, I'm going to leave if you don't give me $100,000. Oh, you know what I mean? It's just a different business side of things. So, again, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, so I almost forgot what the overall question was. I hope I answered it.
You're good. Yeah, I think what's happened is we've decided to spread money as far as it can possibly go, and we have not been super thoughtful about the 16-year-old kid who shouldn't have money like that introduced to his life. He or she has enough going on as it is.
Yeah.
And as it relates to the college game, we just seem to hand athletes the easy button. And look, I'm not saying it was perfect 30 years ago,
right.
But we've handed a lot of easy buttons, and they haven't learned the lessons that your Culpepper 18 or 17 learned that one game. Not even close. Got nowhere near the lessons that your kids learned.
Yeah. So it's very different, and I understand that it's at some level it's a business. So yeah, again, that just goes back to, as a college coach, or as a high school coach, you got to be able to adjust, and as a college coach, you do as well. Just in that profession, you got to be able to adapt and make some of those changes that you need to.
So I'm gonna take it back to something fun again. Is a tomato bowl still a thing?
Yes, it is. It is. It's
is that
it's week 5 for us. Yeah.
Is that your biggest rival? Because I mean, back when I was going to school, that was a huge rivalry. The Tucker Freeman rivalry, Holland Springs Verona. Some of those rivalries have still stayed relevant. Is this still a relevant rivalry in your eyes?
Yeah, I think so. I've been extremely fortunate. I will say this, because I've actually coached on both sides of it. I at one point did coach at former Lee Davis, now Mechanicsville, for 2 years. So I've been in the game, on both sides. Luckily for me, and fortunate enough for me, I've yet to lose one.
Wow.
So that is I'm not gonna complain about it. But yes, it's still a rivalry. But whether it's the biggest, I don't know. I think obviously Hanover and Atlee and some of the other teams that we play, just because the games have been really competitive, and not saying that the Mechanicsville game hasn't, but I think just with our schedule, it seems like there's a lot of games that it's like, they're all competitive. So I'm not sure if for me personally, look at it differently than I do another game. So, but yes, it's still a thing. And I know a lot of people still get, pretty excited about it.
Yeah. If you're of a certain age and you're from around here, those are the only 2 high schools for the longest time in the county. Yeah, but I imagine there's some fun rivalries that have developed since Atlee and Hanover have come to play. Do you have any rivals outside the county these days?
Well, I mean, we just played that Louisa game. That game, because we played, what was it, for my first year here in 19, was such a monster game. We ended up beating them at their place. I kind of at a last minute field goal to push us, to the region title. And then the last year they got us. So this year, that was kind of a rivalry. Those, I would, Verina is a rivalry just because it's been, pretty competitive the last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, I could say that about just about most of our schedule. So I think just because the level of competition that we play, yeah, most games are like, oh man, I'm looking forward to beating them or playing them. Our kids get pretty motivated by, most of the teams I think we play.
What year did you come to Virginia?
2007. I believe 2007, 2008, something along those lines. Yeah.
So it's been roughly 17 years. What's kept you here?
Boy, when I got here, I didn't really know. I kind of just was feeling things out, and once I got here, things moved kind of quickly for me. Like I said, I went from one school kind of to the next, trying to find the right fit and find what worked, and then I found myself at Randolph-Macon for a short period of time, and then I took it 2 years where I was in Georgia before I came back. And what kept me here was just an opportunity. I always wanted the opportunity to be a head coach. And when I was in Georgia, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great opportunity, and I was with a bunch of really good people. But I came back to be a head coach, and it just kept me in the area. But I do like it in Virginia. I think it's a great place. It allows me, I'm close enough to go home, or I'm close enough to kind of go to different parts, in the southern, so it allows me just to be in different places. So I don't mind that, but I definitely consider this home right now. There's no question about that.
Yeah. The typical answer I give people is you're close to the mountains, the beach, and a ton of history.
Yeah.
And the weather's not bad. The people are pretty laid back, and it's a lot less expensive than New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah. That's a good point. There's a lot of people that I know that have moved in the area from that were from Buffalo originally.
Well, cool. Well, Coach, let's end with you talking about your wife and your son. Just tell us a little bit about them.
Oh man. Well, I'll say this. There's being a coach's wife is probably harder than being a football coach, I would imagine, for what my wife has put up with for the last, this is my 27th or 28th year of coaching. What she puts up with and what she sees both sides of it. I think not many people understand. They see what they see on Friday night or they see on game night, but what actually goes on behind the scenes is long. The hours that are put in are way, way more than that. And it's a huge sacrifice. And it's been a huge sacrifice for both of them. I mean, my son he's been moved around a little bit here and there. He's been here, he's been in Georgia, and then he's back here. So we moved him around, unfortunately. And that was kind of, just on my part, because I, coached, we moved around a little bit, but extremely, my wife and my son have been extremely supportive. Now on the flip side of it, I'm now my son's in the program, so I'm coaching with him, which is always going to be a challenge. But it's great in the times that in the off season and things like that, the time that we spend it together, it's good. It's really good.
So you say program, that reminds me that you have JV responsibilities. I mean, that's your team as well, even though you may not be the head coach of the team. They're under your program.
I mean, everything, it's, football is kind of all encompassing. There's so many things that go into it. You look at the fundraising part of it, you look at the development part of it. It's a year-round commitment. And I think that's some things that people just don't understand. It's not me showing up on Friday just with a clipboard in my hand or a couple sheets of paper. It's all those hours that people don't see, or me being away. I would say I'm definitely at the school more than I am home. And that's a huge burden on obviously the family, and especially when my son was younger, that put a lot of stress on my wife to kind of, do more. So I'm very thankful for all of those things, because it can be a very selfish profession in regards to, because you don't spend a lot of time at home, and even when you're home, you're not really home. Your mind's somewhere else. I'm very thankful to have that support. My wife's been fantastic over, all this time, and supporting me. So I'm very thankful for that. And, for both of them, so when we do have time to kind of get away, this last year, we went up to the Rose Bowl. And that was an awesome experience. So, we do the best we can in regards to kind of getting away and doing some of those little things where it's just us. But yeah, she's been, through the trenches, good, bad, or indifferent with me. But I know it's definitely a sacrifice on her end. But on the flip side of that, my son gets to see different things, and experience different opportunities. So that's nice too.
Yeah, absolutely. Living in one place is cool, because you can have some deep roots, and there's a lot of value in having deep roots, but moving around also makes you a little more worldly, a little more knowledgeable, a little more appreciative, and probably empathetic in the long haul. Well, Coach, hey, appreciate you doing this. Really do. Yeah. We wish you a ton of luck the rest of the season. Kevin and I'm a Patrick Henry fan for, I don't know, almost 5 decades now. So I'm rooting for you guys.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.